Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August 3rd, 2020 episode of the Cyber Insecurity stream. My name is Neil Bridges, and thank you for joining me today. If this is your first time joining us for the stream, our mission is to elevate the conversation around cybersecurity and make it more digestible for a for a broader audience. Sorry for the laughing there. New stream setup, so I'm not used to looking at the camera over here today. That's my fault. Thank you for my producer for that one. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, we stream from 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time. Cybersecurity is such a state of flux, and there's always something for us to talk about. And so our goal is to really focus on multiple aspects of the industry. Whether you're an experienced veteran or new to the field, whether you barely know how to spell cyber or someone who was born in cyber, this stream is for you. We stream on Twitch. Videos go up on YouTube and Facebook. Post stream. That way we can hit all demographics, all ages and all skill levels. We're hoping to get approval to stream to LinkedIn here before long. We'll let you know when that happens. But for the meantime, if you find these streams helpful, please don't hesitate to hit that follow button over on Twitch, hit that subscribe button over on YouTube, and hit that like button on Facebook. If you're looking for us on Twitter, you can find us at ITJunkie. That's the best place to get updates on the stream schedule, and things of that nature. Now, with those things out of the way, let's cover just a few logistics items. We do, as always, try to have special guests on the show. Tonight we do have a very special guest. I'll announce her here in a little bit. If you do have an interest in being a guest on our show, please shoot us a message over on our Twitter account at ITJunkie, and we'll have a conversation about getting you on the show as a special guest. This week is a big week, just in general from a cybersecurity perspective. It is, typically we would find ourselves in the heat of Vegas this time of year for the annual hacker conferences, Black Hat and DEF CON. Obviously, with the global pandemic and everything that's going on, we won't be attending those. As a matter of fact, they got canceled. Black Hat started today and tomorrow, and I know they've got a large amount of events that are happening for Black Hat. DEF CON is completely free, and let me say that again for folks who are listening, right? DEF CON is completely free this year, and so if you're wondering what DEF CON is like or wanting to get in on that, you should absolutely, I highly encourage you to get in on DEF CON this year, especially since it's free. Most of the capture the flags are free. Don't worry about experience levels or things like that. Just get in there and get part of that community and experience part of that community. With that being said, this week we're going to obviously have our normal stream Monday and Wednesday. We're going to do special streams Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We're going to try to we're not going to try to steal any thunder from DEF CON by streaming their content and whatnot. But what we want to do is we want to be able to provide commentary, post-talk commentary for some of the things that are being streamed on DEF CON. And so we're going to pick some talks that we're going to watch. We're going to pick some villages that we're going to attend. And then obviously we're still planning on doing Capture the Flags this week as well. We're not going to be giving away answers for any of the Capture the Flags, so don't tune into the stream if you think that you're going to get answers to Capture the Flags. But we are going to try to stream some of the Capture the Flags and show you some of the tactics, techniques, and procedures that we would use either in the Blue Team Village or in the Trace Labs OSINT Capture the Flag. With that also being said, we're going to be doing a ton of giveaways this weekend. I've got tons of old Hack 5 gear, some pineapples. As a matter of fact, I've got some stuff hanging out down here, next to my desk. And so if you're around for the stream this week and participating in the stream, you do have to be present to win, but we will be doing a ton of giveaways for a lot of hacker gear. We've got some pineapples. We've got some software-defined radios. We've got some things like that. And so stay tuned towards the later end of this week for the DEF CON streams, and we'll be giving a lot of that away. So with all of that being said, I do want to announce our special guest for tonight. Our special guest for tonight is Miss Tori Ward. Tori is a very high-level executive for a very, very big endpoint protection vendor. Her opinions are hers and hers alone and do not reflect or are not endorsed by her employer. But with all that being said, Tori's a very good friend of mine. I'm very happy to have her here and have her opinions with her 20 years of experience working in endpoint technology. So, Tori, thank you for joining me and my viewers for the stream tonight.
Thanks for having me. And ditto back to you. Good friend.
This is going to be fun.
Yes.
All right. So, as always, let's jump right into the news. Lots to talk about this week. And so when we look at some of the one of the first things I really wanted to talk about was, this deal with TikTok and Microsoft. Now, this is not a political conversation. We will absolutely not be making a political conversation. Before I jump right into this, I was remiss of telling everybody, by the way, we do have chat rooms open. We do have moderators open. This is a very open discussion, both for Tori and myself. And so as you come across questions, as we say something, make sure that you drop questions in the chat room, and Tori and myself would be more than happy to answer them. So again, back to Microsoft and TikTok, and again, we're not going to make this a politics conversation about this at all, but when we talk about TikTok, right, TikTok has been in the news a ton for its privacy issues, specifically in the sense that TikTok as an app is owned by the Chinese government, and it has a tendency to have very, very overarching permissions, to the sense that it's become a pretty huge concern for other countries as well. And we see this, with countries like India, where it has actually gone out and started to ban TikTok as an app inside the country. And so, and then when we talk about that, and we talk about it being on the heels of the Twitter hack here recently, with where Twitter has been a victim of a cyber attack, whereby some folks took over some very, very high profile social media accounts. We talk about, some of the implications that could have from a cyber perspective. And I really just kind of want to throw it out there, Tori, to you, and see what you think. Like, with 100 million users on a platform like TikTok, the fact that we've already got Facebook and Snap out there for Snapchat, and that Microsoft already owns, parts of LinkedIn, which is another huge social media. Do you think the U.S. needs another large conglomerate like Microsoft owning one of the largest and potentially, cyber influential social media sites that are out there?
Well, I think and I have kids that use TikTok. I don't, but I think just from we're trying to protect you from you perspective, I would much rather have Microsoft own it than the Chinese government owning it, or Chinese company owning it. So I guess from that perspective, I don't really have an issue. I feel like, especially in some of these platforms, specifically that are targeted to a younger user base who is not that educated, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about education tonight, is it can't help for kids and younger people who aren't as familiar with cyber to have some guardrails, and I think Microsoft would help us do that. And we could argue, well, Facebook's security strategy hasn't been great or whatever, but I think I'd rather have Microsoft doing it, I guess, would be my opinion on that.
But I mean, you bring up a really good point about education, right? Because and I've mentioned this several streams ago, when we talk about security awareness, we don't license folks to use the internet. And I know that's a really...
I love that you said that on one of yours. I love that. I was picturing my daughter coming up to her computer, and she's like, I got to pass this test before I get on the internet. And I thought, well, that's never going to happen, because they wouldn't do it.
No, but you mentioned, you brought up a really good point about help Microsoft being an advocate for helping kids be more safe on the internet, by it being owned by Microsoft. But how can... to your point, we've seen Facebook fail at that over and over again. We've seen Snapchat fail at that over and over again. What makes you think that Microsoft is any better at it?
Well, I mean, I think, like with anything, it's a layered approach, right? So I think there's education that all of those companies could be better at. And again, I'm going to assume that if it's Microsoft or Facebook, that they're putting their best foot forward to do education. Think they can do a better job, but I think there's outward education, and then I think there's internal education, right? So those platforms need to be secure internally. That has nothing to do with their users. Their users should feel comfortable that their platform is being secured by the company. But then they're like the license thing, there does need to be more education. And I think, I don't know, I'm bullish in that there will become more regulations around just not allowing kids to kind of blow their big toe off, and not even kids. I say kids, but I mean any user, right? Because it's a tricky area to navigate, I think, for sure.
Do you, when we talk about social media and we talk about privacy, right? I think Cambridge Analytica, and again, not to turn this political, but more on the sense of like we saw with Cambridge Analytica just how, free isn't really free for us, and your data has a value to companies like Facebook and Snapchat and Microsoft
Yeah.
and things like that. You know, do we think that Microsoft needs more information on us? Like, I mean, if we ask that question, if we said if Microsoft bought TikTok and its 100 million users and even blew it up and grew it to try to be a large competitor to Facebook and Snapchat, how much more intrinsic damage could that do to user privacy?
Well, it's a free country, right? So you don't have to be on it, right? I mean, you don't have to be on it if you don't want your data, right? There's a trade-off there. So I want to be on it because I want to communicate or want to show videos or make the videos or whatever or do it, because certainly there's platforms
I want to see Tori up there doing Renegade on TikTok.
platforms for good, but I also think that's the trade-off, right? And that's what's happening. Again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I guess for me, I'd rather Microsoft be doing it than the Chinese, I suppose, right? But maybe that's a false sense of security. But I will go back to the internal obligation of those companies, which is it is their obligation to keep your data private, right? And they have to have measures in place to do that. And we see, I mean, that's the whole part of the reason for your show is we see every day that companies are breached and that doesn't happen, right? But we all have to strive towards making that happen. And obviously that's the business I'm in, so I'm pretty intimate with the fact that I think some people do it good and some people don't do it so good. So, um, but that is their obligation.
Now, since you bring up data privacy and you bring up companies protecting privacy, and this is a little bit of a rabbit hole when we talk about this, but since we're going down this, let's pull on this thread a little bit longer, right? Is do you think GDPR and do you think CCPA are doing good for data privacy concerns, especially in social media sites like Facebook and Snapchat and potentially Microsoft owning TikTok in the future?
I mean, I think what I would say is from what I've seen on the enterprise side, um, data security does not mean secure, right? Or data protection does not mean security. I think I think people have really good intentions and they try, but data protection is a tricky talk about a rabbit hole. It's a real trick. And I do, the reason I make the comment is that I don't think data protection equals security. Is I feel like sometimes there is a false sense of, well, I'm secure because I followed these regulations or I did what I was told to do. No,
No.
it doesn't work like that.
So when
It
we
doesn't. You
No,
know that.
I know that. I know that. But I think, I think the false sense of security, I would agree with that sentiment, right? Because, CCPA, so for those listening, right, California just released their California Consumer Privacy Act. One of the mods can please link CCPA in there. GDPR 2 years ago released their data privacy regulation for the EU, and I think I've mentioned this on a couple of previous streams as well. I think we're going to see, I think Maine and New York, if I recall correctly, I think are two of the states that are going to quickly follow suit for those data privacy. And I remember when CCPA happened, the day CCPA went live, Facebook got hit with just this massive lawsuit over California consumer privacy issues that were out there. And so like it's curious when Microsoft wants to step into that game as well, because are they really saying that they're prepared, they're more prepared than Facebook and Snapchat that have been doing this longer and better to deal with those data privacy issues?
Well, I mean, I love the fact that the new laws for data privacy, right? So again, because I like rules, and I think it's easier to abide by something that is a mandate, right? Versus you could do it if you want to. So I think, and that I think that helps give us a framework to guide, or helps companies have a framework to guide themselves. Um, I can't, company to company. I mean, I can't really speak to it, Facebook or I mean, I think I think they're all in a, in a tricky situation, protection. Microsoft's not looking to buy TikTok so they can lose money on it, right? So, I mean, they're into it for a reason, and they should be, and I applaud them, and they're an amazing company. So, they'll have to figure that out. But at the same time, I'm sure that they are prepared to figure that out in the best way that they can.
So just I want to pull on one more thread, just since you brought it down in terms of the data privacy stuff. When we look at some of the follow-on lawsuits on data privacy around things like British Airways and Marriott over in the EU, where they've gone out of their way to have those lawsuits for GDPR filed in the UK, so that they can intentionally get the least restrictive of that 15% revenue fine that they're supposed to get. Don't you think that it nullifies the effect of having those data privacy regulations for companies to be constantly out there looking for your loopholes, or is that just business as usual for legal teams?
No, I think it's totally bogus, right? I mean, it is, but it's going to happen, so you have to be prepared for it, right? I mean, I think, but again, because what's going to happen, you have to do everything that you can on the back end to make sure that you're protected, right? And that's not just technology, that's people, that's processes, that's your legal team. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that, because it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I mean, whether I think it's right or not, it doesn't matter.
So final word on Microsoft buying TikTok. You a thumbs up or a thumbs down on Microsoft buying TikTok?
I'm a thumbs up.
You're a thumbs up on Microsoft buying TikTok? Yeah. There you go, folks. Looks like somebody in chat made a comment. Security guru guy, thank you very much for that. Tori, we'll let you chime in first on this one if you want to. Companies generally only pay attention to a security guideline, in quotes, if ignoring it would cost them money via lawsuits, etc. Agree, disagree?
Say that again. Yeah.
Companies generally only pay attention to a security guideline if ignoring it would cost them money via lawsuits, etc.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that? Why not?
No, because I think companies. So I'm going to talk general security,
sure.
Right? More than just data protection. I really do think that companies, from my experience, right, and I have dealt with a lot of large enterprise company, I think it's way more than lawsuits. I think it really is genuinely trying to protect the company's users, the company's IP, the company's brand. I mean, I think it's far and beyond the company's money, right? So, look at all the ransomware attacks, right? I mean, and some of those payments are nothing to those companies, but it's obviously bad. So yeah, no, I would say companies are trying to secure their environments because it's the right thing to do.
So I'm going to take security guru guys, stance on this one, because I am in the cynical camp that I think that the reason that we don't have people taking security guidelines seriously is because the sting isn't hard enough for them. I've said this before we ever started streaming. You and I have talked about this before. I've talked about this at anywhere I can say it, right, is we don't make it painful enough for companies to fail their data protection responsibility for users. The banks have been doing this for years, right, where because whenever you swipe that credit card and it shows up as a fraudulent transaction, and the bank takes care of you and it's like, hey, don't worry about it, we'll refund you your money, we'll send you a new credit card, yada 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 yada. I think that coddling of the user base has prevented the users from feeling a sting, and therefore it's prevented the companies from feeling a sting whenever they've had a data breach. And I'll give you a real world example with Target, right? And I'm not knocking Target at all, right? Because they're a fantastic business, but they only suffered 1/4's loss of data for losing all of that credit card information, and now they're at record profit levels. And so I absolutely think that companies will ignore most security guidelines until the sting of that is high enough, or at least until the user sting of that is high enough.
Well, but they're also the poster child for a breach. I mean, how many years ago was that? And we're still talking about it. Too many companies have been breached since then. But but you're right. I mean, financially, it didn't really hurt them. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. The sting is a tricky one.
what would you? I mean, what would you think should? I mean, let's take a Microsoft TikTok deal, right? Let's say Microsoft buys TikTok, and literally the day after the deal closes, some massive data security breach, gets exposed about the amount of data that's leaked out there by TikTok. What would make the sting hurt good for a company like TikTok to say, or for a company like Microsoft to say, "Oh shoot, we've got to take this seriously"?
It, I have no idea. You have no idea. I mean, neither one of us have any idea. You don't,
You
right?
don't.
Because to your point, the ramifications, generally the ramification, the sting is really bad for a little bit, and then it just kind of goes away. I will say though that anybody who's suffered any sort of breach doesn't, there is sting. It's not like they just walk away and go, oh well, that was too bad that happened. I would say in almost every case there's at least a lesson learned or change of process or something like that, so that's good. I mean, that brings awareness. But I don't know. I have to have a no comment on should the penalties be higher to the guy whose card gets hacked, right? Like I have to have a no comment on that one because I think that's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. With that, we'll go ahead and move on to our kind of our next topic. And for those who remember last week, we did also talk about this last week as well. Garmin got hit with ransomware last week, or that was last week, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure it was last week. The days are kind of escaping me now. They got hit with Wasted Locker ransomware. It took out their services for 4 days. It was a week ago Friday is what it was. Yeah, they were out for 4 days. One of the things that we first commented on the show right when it happened was that they weren't nearly as transparent as something like a Twitter, which had happened the week before. They'd come out and said that they had some issues with some of their services that had brought down some of their critical servers. We talked about that on stream. It was only through some of the leaked stuff that had happened, through some of the employees that we had heard that it had potentially been some form of ransomware. And at the time that we had heard that the ransom demand that the hackers were asking for as part of that ransomware was upwards of about $10 million. This article was then released here a couple of days ago that it has been confirmed that Garmin did receive the decryptor for Wasted Locker ransomware. So for those who are listening, most ransomware, that comes out there this day, the whole purpose behind ransomware, right, is that they hold your data hostage. Well, that holding your data hostage does have to come with the promise of you getting some form of a decryptor key that would then unlock that data and make it usable, for you again. And so some of these large-scale ransomware attacks that we've seen, have very much been in the millions and millions of dollars when it comes for ransom. And there's oftentimes a broker that's involved that kind of facilitates, that transaction between a company like Garmin and the ransomware owners. Just to kind of make sure that the decryptor works, everything's, copacetic in terms of like making the transaction from a big company like Garmin to the ransomware payers. And so when we see an article like this, confirm that Garmin received the decryptor for Wasted Locker ransomware, it is inherently assumed in that title, right, that Garmin paid some amount of that $10 million ransom to get their data back. So with all that being said, I kind of want to pop one over to you, Tori, and say, like, under what circumstances do you think companies like Garmin should pay the ransom for any type of ransomware attack like this?
Well, they shouldn't have themselves in the situation for it to happen, I guess, to begin with. But again, I mean, that's not a knock on Garmin at all because it does happen. Again, until there's law around it, it probably doesn't matter what I think about it. I think here's the thing, and Neil and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, from what I track in my business, e-crime actors are much worse than a nation state actor. So an e-crime actor would be like a ransomware, Wasted Locker, and their activity, especially in recent years, is way greater than nation states, and they're more sophisticated than nation states. So activity this year is like 87% of attacks that I've seen or that I track are e-crime, and only about 17 nation states. And I think there could be a perception that that those numbers are a little bit more equal, or oh, it's governments that are doing this. No, this is for money. This is a business. It's a big business, and it's a business that's growing exponentially. So they love it when there's an event like a COVID, July 4th, taxes, right? It doesn't really matter. COVID happens to be a real big event.
Right.
We have tracked over 1,000 different COVID related attacks since March, right? Like, so an attack that would have something to do with COVID, whether it was like a phishing email, something COVID that somebody would click on, that's how ransomware could get into the environment. So I don't like that they would. I think when you pay the ransom, you're saying to the attacker, it's okay, go do it to the next company because they'll just pay too. But what else are you supposed to do if if you've been hit?
Well, so I mean, you bring up an interesting point, right? So and again, whether it's information that you're tracking because of the business that you're in, or just from what you've seen from talking to the multitudes of leaders that you talk to out there, do you think, or does your experience tell you that if Garmin pays this ransomware, do you think that they're at risk of being hit again, if not by Wasted Locker, maybe, Dridex, maybe some other form of ransomware, because that organization, maybe it's Maze this next time because that organization knows that Garmin is going to pay? Do you think that shows the, other, e-crime actors that are out there, that these guys are willing to pay up and pay ransom?
Well, I think the e-crime actors know that Garmin, or a company, I won't say Garmin, like any company that's been hit is probably going to bone up on some different security practices, right? So they're probably, I guess you could say in the next couple of weeks they could be a target, but I don't think I don't know. I don't think that's what I think criminals are going to go after size, and they're going to go after scale, and they're going to, I mean, they've gotten Garmin, they're going to go to the next guy. I mean, that's what I would say. I don't, that being said though, I mean, there's the bigger the industry becomes, the more, there's tons of spinoffs. So, there's a new actor. So Wasted Locker is a ransomware actor. There's an actor called Viking Spider that it's the same, right? They're brand new. They didn't exist last year. And so there's like all these little spinoffs because I think these actors are finding that there's real money in this. And so this certainly doesn't help a bad actor go, wow, I think I'm gonna get out of the business. I mean, this is definitely, when you pay the ransom, it makes any bad actor go, ooh, there could be some good stuff in here. And unlike the Twitter thing where those guys were, maybe a little unsophisticated, these guys are sophisticated. They're probably not going to get caught, and there's a perpetuation of them not getting caught.
So let's hold that thought in terms of, because we're going to talk about Grand Crab here in a little bit, and I think that those comments are going to be very relevant when we talk about Grand Crab. If we go back to companies paying ransom demands, and we talk about a broker like Coveware, right, which again makes a business on interacting with Garmin, makes a business on interacting with threat actors, makes it a business to have these cryptocurrency wallets out there to facilitate these types of transactions and things like that. Do you believe in your professional opinion, do you think that there's an ethical concern with using a broker like Coveware to facilitate those ransomware payments?
Well, it's crazy. Right?
It's crazy that there's a business model like that?
Yes. I've been in the business so long that I remember laying in bed being like, I bet viruses are going to come to an end and I'm going to have to get a new job, and being very worried about it. That's how long I go back. So that's not going to happen now, at least not before I retire anyway. But so I think it's bizarre, but I also, a business is a business, right? And in this case, this is a true public news story of Garmin did get hit. They did want to be decrypted, and they did have to have a form of doing that. And so that business helps them. I mean, I don't know how you can. I don't know how you can fault it.
So then let me flip it a little bit differently. Then back to not Garmin, but a company like Garmin, right, a public company with shareholders. do companies like that, and I'd love folks in chat who are listening too, I'd love to see what the chat says about this as well, right? Is do companies like this, do they have an ethical obligation to their shareholders that if they choose to pay these ransoms that they have to report it or they have to somehow denote it? I don't think that that's a mandatory, SEC requirement on the 10K.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion on that is that they should, but yeah, it all comes out generally anyway, right? Now, like they say, but all media is good media. So, I have actually learned more about what Garmin does than I knew before. So that's probably good.
because of their
writing a flight plan anytime soon, but I know that I could do that now with Garmin if I wanted to. So that's good. Publicity is publicity.
Does it worry you to know that the pilots who are filing their flight plan are using software from a company that got hit with ransomware?
Yeah, of course it does.
Yeah. Does it make you feel less safe when you fly?
Well, I'm not flying probably ever again, so I guess I won't have to worry about it. But well, no, probably not going forward, because again, I feel like there is, at least in like, since I've been in cyber, there is a perception of, we still will have companies say, well, we only make blah blah blah, nobody wants that, or we only do da da da, that's, nobody's going after that. It's just not the case. And so I feel like Garmin will be more secure now. They will be. They definitely will. They'll take different precautions. They'll do things differently. It's an alarm bell, and they're not singled out. Tons of other people have been in the same position.
So on that same note, right? Just I'm gonna skip the Twitter thing just real quick, since we were talking about ransomware a little bit. We're gonna talk about Grand Crab right here a little bit. So the Grand Crab ransomware operator was arrested in Belarus. Now that's not news, and I don't mean to say that as news, other than some of the stats that are actually in here about Grand Crab, and specifically just in the way that their operations were, and this is a lot to your point, Tori, in terms of how some of these companies, right? We call them companies, right? When we look at Grand Crab as an organization, right? They were an entire e-crime business that made their money off of ransomware up until about June of 2019. And when Grand Crab shut down in June of 2019, they were claiming that they had at some point in time amassed some $2 billion in ransom payments, of which they themselves, the Grand Crab folks, had earned more than about $150 million. And so when you look at this, and one of the things I like about this article, right, it talks very much, Tori, about what it is you're talking about, how these organizations operate, where this particular individual that got arrested, he was known as a Grand Crab affiliate. And you can kind of see that right here. As part of their role of infecting victims, these affiliates, so this guy who was arrested, would earn 60% for the first 3 ransom payments that they were responsible for, and then after the 3rd payment, their revenue would jump to 70%. So that means that 40% of the first 3 ransom payments would then go to the folks who wrote the ransomware, guys who ran the console, the e-crime kind of syndicate, if you will, that owned that, and then afterwards, 30% would go to that as well. And so you've got these e-crime businesses that are at the center of this massive ransomware as a service network, who then reach out and enlist these affiliates to install ransomware on their behalf, and then they split the profits. And if you go back to like the stream a couple weeks ago where Keith and I were talking about this not too long ago, you'll see that we talked about this as well. But that basically boils down that the Grand Crab folks would get about $840. Or excuse me, the affiliates would get $840 per victim, and then the Grand Crab folks would get about $360 per victim. And so this kind of speaks very much toward what you're talking about in terms of how some of these e-crime syndicates work. And so I really wanted to ask you, like, when we look at Garmin, when we look to your point about the rise of ransomware, do you think ransomware has gotten more serious, and when do you think that actually happened for the world?
Yeah, so keep in mind, I'm not a threat intelligence analyst,
Sure.
at all, right? So I mean, what I know is just more on being in the industry and understanding, customers that I work with, and just having been in the industry. That said, I mean, I definitely think that there has been an uptick in just e-crime, whether it's ransomware or not. I don't think there has been an uptick in e-crime activity because there is a lot of money to be made in it, right? So I mean, so one of the things that we've tracked is that from June of 2019 to June of 2020, 100% increase in e-crime activity.
Mm.
Now, again, could you relate that back to COVID because there's a good platform to fool people around, right? Like there's a lot of different reasons, but um, I definitely think it has momentum, um, and not stopping anytime soon. There was one group, and this was like this. I heard the story last year. I can't remember who the group was, but that would like a pretty, I think, known e-crime actor group that would work for only a short period of time, and then they take like 9 months off, right? So they'd like, they'd like get their work done, and then like they all go on vacation, and then they come back, and they right. So smart,
Right.
they're all rich,
Right.
it's like they can go on vacation. So it's crazy though.
But when you talk about e-crime, right, and again, I know you're not a threat intel, but you see a lot of this, and you make it your business to understand a lot of these threats that are out there. Do you see the sophistication level, because you've been working in the endpoint space for well over 20 years. You've worked for some massive names and some good clients. We don't have to talk about them here, obviously, but have you seen, what have you seen about ransomware that scares you, or that shows that that's a more predominant threat, or potentially a less predominant threat, just over your years of having to deal with those types of activities?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I do go back 100 years. I mean, literally, when I started, it was for notoriety, right? It was like, oh, look what I did, and I'm cool, and that was that, and right. So literally, there was no money in it when I first started. So just seeing the different trends. I mean, I think if we're talking just ransomware and just kind of, I would say what worries me more than ransomware is just sophistication of attacks.
Mm.
And that worries me on both sides, right? Nation state and e-crime. I think attackers are more sophisticated. Technology is more sophisticated, right? Like we've all got to keep like upping our game to to ward it off, right? And again, I think that's more than technology. That's more than education. It's more than there are a lot of layers in that, but I definitely think it's not going to be ransomware forever. It'll be something else. It'll be the attack vector will change because we've seen that right over many years. So, but these sort of, I think this is awesome. Like this article that you pull up here, Neil, I think is really good education for like a user that maybe isn't familiar with the industry, because like it is kind of hard to believe, right? Like it's like, really,
it's hard to believe that it's its own business model. Like you've got these, it's like an Amazon, fulfillment by Amazon type thing that you see on Instagram all the time, right?
Yes.
With when we talk about ransomware, and let's call a spade for a little bit here, right? When we talk about Garmin getting hit with ransomware, when we talk about an entire business model like Grand Crab, building a business model around having a central business and affiliates distributing the ransomware and things like that, in as general sense as you can be from a transparent perspective, why do you think it's hard for endpoint solutions to detect ransomware?
Well, I mean, and I feel like I've said this lots of different times, but I think it's more than technology, right? So it's a whole path. It's the tool for sure. And I think if we're going to talk just about tools, it's tools have modernized. Tools aren't the same tools that they were 10 years ago. All vendors have modernized with that, right? But some differently than others. I think there's been a good opportunity in this space to new technologies been brought to bear, which is very cool. So, but I think it's the people, it's process, it's education, it's regulations. I mean, I think it's a lot more than just did that solution catch it or not, right? So,
it's less about whether the tools aren't keeping pace with the threat actors. It's about whether we're keeping pace at every leg of the race that we have to run to keep up with the threat actors.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be prudent with your technology. And if you stay stale with your technology, right? How many times have we heard when an incident has happened, well, I had all this stuff, it just wasn't configured.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it doesn't really matter, right? Like if you left the seatbelt at home, but you drove the car and you got into an accident, it didn't help you much, did it? Right? Oh, I forgot to install the seatbelt, right? So I think so. I think tools are really important. And I think in this space where it's more than the tooling, it's how easy is the tool, right? So I had all the tools, but they were super hard to deploy. Okay, well, that's an important factor then. How can I get something out there quickly? How can I make sure it works really well? I mean, that's, there's a whole conversation around tools, but
Sure.
in technology, and I will say, I think for customers that are properly implemented with the right solutions, they do stop the ransomware. This isn't just, oh, these guys are getting through. It's not, but it's more than just one little tool. It's a full solution that has to be operated.
And I know that I know we're speculating a ton specifically when we talk about Garmin and whatnot, but we know that we suspect, right? We surmise that they're regulated because of the FAA stuff that we mentioned and things like that. Where do companies, in your opinion, from what you see, when companies have a regulation like the FAA, and we're not going to knock on Garmin because we don't know exactly what's going on in there, but when organizations like Garmin have a regulatory requirement that they have to adhere to certain amounts of policies and things like that, is it your belief, and what it sounds like your belief is that it's a systemic failure of people, process, and technology that allows something like that to happen in a highly regulated company, potentially like a Garmin? Or, what do you think is it that fails in identifying that gap in whatever the problem is that allows them to be compromised?
I mean, I think it's nice if they're regulated because maybe, they have different controls in place, but I mean, regulated or not, right? Lots of companies, private, public, it doesn't matter, are holding important data for that company, personal data, employees, etc. Right? So, I I would say it's less about mapping back to the regulation and more about mapping back to what the security process is.
Hmm.
And how seriously they take it. And again, that I'm not saying that about Garmin. I'm just saying in general about many companies.
Sure. Okay, that's fair. Okay, we'll move on to the next topic for tonight. We did talk. Twitter is going to be the new hack that keeps on giving. we keep uncovering, and again, not a knock on Twitter. Twitter's doing a fantastic job from a transparency perspective to give as much information as possible, about the attack that's gone on. And so with this latest kind of disclosure of information that's happened, right, it's come to light that 3 people were arrested in regards to the Twitter hack. And so without diving way deep into the Twitter hack and rehashing it, right, it was a 17-year out of Miami. It was another individual, I think, out of Orlando, and another individual out of the UK, where the 17-year-old is alleged to be the mastermind. I just kind of want to hit a couple of high points here when we talk about this, right? Is that these folks who were arrested. When we talk about Bitcoin, if you go back to the episode where we talked about the Twitter hack, we talk explicitly about Bitcoin, what it is, how it works, and things like that. When you see an organization like Coinbase here, there's another company that's mentioned in an article, Binance, that does these are exchanges whereby somebody can put Bitcoin into and then get cash back out of it. It's a way to basically trade Bitcoin for normal money. The accounts that they opened on Coinbase, they were verified with a Florida driver's license in the name of the alleged mastermind. There was a forum. If you go back to the stream, we talked about the forum that they had utilized, the OG users forum. That forum had been hacked, and all of the private messages had been dumped out on the internet. And of course, the FBI, was first in line to kind of get those private messages. They were using a tool called Discord, which is a very common chat client. It's open source. It's open source. It's free to use. There's no security behind it. It's, if you know the address of the server, you can basically get into the Discord. And so, it's a very public means of communication. And so when you look at all three of those things together, we see, to Tori's point earlier, right? I don't think that we see a large amount of sophistication that kind of goes on with the Twitter hack. And again, folks who are in chat, if they think that this is a sophisticated attack, and the reason I bring that up is I had a conversation with Jeff earlier, Tori, and you'll have to give Jeff a piece of your mind about this one next time you see him, right? Where he actually thinks that this is a pretty sophisticated attack, and these guys have a future career at the NSA. And I'm on the other side.
So do I. That's what I'm thinking. Like, these kids are 17. They're going to have a rocketing career. This is it.
Well, I guess I take the other side of this, right? Which is, what do you think about the state of cybersecurity when a bunch of teens not practicing good OPSEC or operational security, where they're using their personal driver's license, they're talking about it openly in Discord, they're using forums that are on the clear net versus the dark web. What does it say about the state of cybersecurity when, a bunch of teens like this can hack a company like Twitter and steal $200,000?
Right. Scary. And in this, and again, I wouldn't say I'm an expert, and I've read about this, but in this case, you can't ever have enough user, right? There was a lot of end user interaction on this one, right? And so, and again, that's not knocking the poor end user, right? But in the companies I worked at, it's like you beat over the head. And obviously I worked for security companies, so that's not a fair fight. But I think Twitter has an obligation to make sure their employees are educated and that their systems are secure.
Do you think that, when you say it like that, do you think that because of the potential worst case scenario that it could have been for Twitter? Or just you think every company has that responsibility?
Well, they have the responsibility because of for the fate of their company, right? Mm-hmm. It's this is in the news, so that's their fate, right? And again, maybe all news is good news anyway. So to your point, does it really matter? Is this really going to affect Twitter? I don't know. Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we look at this and we look back, and again, this is the parallel that I draw, right? Is this happened to Twitter? It could have easily happened to any company. And, this could have been a lot worse, right? I think if we were to argue sophistication, their tactics weren't sophisticated. They organized themselves to conduct a cybercrime, but they were short-sighted in their goals, where they were only concerned about stealing $200,000 worth of Bitcoin that they clearly thought that they were going to get away with. But this could have been much worse if they had some real organization planning around it.
Yeah. If you're trying to find the vaccine for COVID, like you don't want people coming in there trying to get that, right? Right. I think it's, and the methods are similar, again, this, or it could have been anywhere, to your point. So, yeah.
So it looks like we got one question about this in chat. Didn't it turn out that there was a support site which had a user and password pinned on the page? It was a support site, but what it was is it was a support site inside of a Slack channel. They had gotten access to a Slack channel, and they had gained inside information on how their internal processes had worked inside of that Slack channel, and that's what helped them. So I'm going to use a term here. So for those who are listening who are familiar with pen testing and red teaming, we use a term called pretexting. Pretexting is basically building your backstory and giving you that convincing argument that you are, the nefarious actor that you say you are. And so the access that they had in on Twitter Slack channel had ultimately given them the information that they needed from a pretext perspective to allow them to call up. And I'll have to double check, but I do believe that it was an IT person inside of Twitter who ultimately disclosed their username and password over the phone and allowed them to bypass MFA and get access to the internal Twitter console. Like Tori said, whoops.
Whoops.
Whoops. So real quick, the last topic that I wanna touch on, and Tori, this is one you and I kind of go back and forth on a little bit. We've had this conversation over a few drinks, in the past before. I've posted about this on LinkedIn. Right, especially when we look across the endpoint detection response or the EDR industry, and I saved this one especially for you. I called up literally all my friends in the endpoint detection business, and you were the only one with the courage who wanted to come on here and talk to me about it. So I appreciate you for that. But last week we saw Qualys, which typically has only played in the vulnerability management space. Whereby they go out and scan websites and servers and things like that and provide a report on vulnerabilities out there. We saw Qualys actually step into that EDR, that endpoint detection response space, with the launch of their Qualys cloud platform to EDR. And there was an entire amount of fanfare around this, and they released it at several of the showcases and conferences that they participated in, and again, without speaking specifically about comparing Qualys to any of the other EDR vendors that are out there, I want to go back to what I said probably a month ago when I did that LinkedIn article, Tori, which is there a commoditization of EDR that's happening in the market space?
So in fairness, I know that Neil loves using the word commodity. So I did look it up. I looked up the definition.
You had to look it up? Why did you tell people that?
No. Because so I was like, well, I know what commodity means. And then I'm like, I want the actual definition. And as it turns out, of course, it's going to help me. So it's an instant of the good is equivalent or nearly so with no regard to who produced it. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, as it relates to EDR, I think there's two factors. Okay. Just like with any technology, it does matter who produces it, right? It does. It does, right? Oracle, Salesforce, right? Like, I mean, you might like one better than the other, but they are not the same thing. They don't work the same. They're not the same, right? So I think that's, if we say EDR is commoditized, I think it's just important to, just because somebody makes it doesn't mean that it operates equivalently, right? I think that.
Well, no, isn't that like saying that, and I don't mean to interrupt you on that one. I thought I caught a breath in there.
Please interrupt.
Oh my gosh. But isn't that, and again, you and I will probably never be in this boat, but just to kind of throw this out there, right? But isn't that like saying that like there's no difference between buying a Lamborghini and buying a Ferrari? Like if you're not in that club where you can utilize the power of those machines side by side, wouldn't you just look at those cars and say, yeah, they're both awesome, they both drive really, really fast, and they both look really, really awesome? Isn't that the definition of commoditization?
So I would say that that's what I would call the other side, right? Which is, if we're going to call EDR, like EDR's a solution in a stack of solutions that can help secure an environment. There's many other solutions around that. I would say, but if we're just going to talk about endpoint EDR, right? So we're not going to talk about network security or anything else like that. I mean, I think that it's the commodity aspect of it is it's way beyond just EDR. If you're only doing EDR, I don't think that's the whole picture. Just my personal opinion on that. I think that's number one. I think number two is, to your point about the Lamborghini or the Ferrari, is there still are not a lot of folks, businesses, full-blown using an EDR capability, right? And so I think EDR wouldn't be equivalent to a Ferrari. I think EDR is equivalent to driving. It's part of the car, right? I would say that in order to be successful or have a good program, you need visibility. That's what EDR would give you. So they're all not made the same, and I would say it's way more than just EDR.
So I think the problem that I have with the argument of they're not all made the same, right, is just because somebody uses one ingredient over another, or just because somebody packages one front end over another, if we consider the functionality of EDR to be visibility, right? You have visibility into the processes, into the inner workings of a machine for the purposes of looking for threats, even if we just keep it at the very, very high level of that. Then how a company does that is it your belief, your personal belief, then it's the fact that every company does it differently that makes it not commodity.
Correct.
So
there's a reason why when there's a breach and publicly they will say, well, we had the tools. So what were you doing with the tools?
mm-hmm.
Right? How easy is it to roll out? How easy is it to scale? How efficient is it? How easy is it to upgrade, modify, control, right? Those are all parts of if EDR is the car, but the wheel doesn't turn, because, right? You've got EDR, but it can't turn the wheel. If I can't get it rolled out, if I can't scale it quickly, make changes fast, right? I mean, I would say that's, one of the biggest issues is that in the industry, not even talking about specific products
mm-hmm.
here, is just upgrades, keeping stuff up to date. How do I get it, how do I get it rolled out quickly? I mean, rollouts, right, right? So that's important. That's really important when you talk about the commodity.
Does when I wrote that article, a month or so ago, it was because somebody had released an open sourced EDR. For those listening who may not know what open source is, right? It's publicly available code. You can go see the source code. You can see how everything is written, and you can basically take that code and then you can use it as is. You can modify it to do something better. Do whatever it is that you want with that code. I think when I wrote that article, where my head was at, right, was, we've seen lots of companies do EDR. But we've seen a lot of different companies. We're not going to get into the different companies and things like that do EDR. But I think with the release of an open source EDR, that's where I really start to believe heavily that EDR is becoming commoditized, is because people are now having open source code for here's how you do EDR. They're telling you how to build that Ferrari or how to build that Lamborghini. And so I guess, does it change your perspective at all to know that the recipe is out there and everybody can do their own version of the cake? Does that make it more or less commoditized for you in your mind?
Well, I think if everybody has a huge staff of Neils, then yeah, it probably would be commoditized, but they don't. There aren't huge staffs of Neils sitting around, waiting to figure out how to use open source EDR.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, right. And I think that goes back to the scalability, right? That really scalability, efficiencies. How do I make myself more productive? Because there's a massive staff shortage, right? I think we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight, but I mean, so a tool has to be easy enough for a non-Neil to be able to figure out and implement and make actually work. Not just I check the box and it's loaded, right? But like it's
got EDR
and it's working. I got it, right? So no,
okay.
I don't think that doesn't. Yeah, no, I don't.
Okay.
I think there aren't bunches of Neils sitting around. That's the problem.
If
there were,
that'd be scary.
Would be scary too.
That'd be scary. So we
that would also be scary.
So we do have one. This one I'm gonna redirect this one to you first, Tori. So make sure you're listening this time.
Okay, I'm gonna try to listen.
All right. So
my water.
So you sip your water while I talk this one out. Okay. So this one looks like it's in regards to EDR. It says. It is the next big antivirus. The story now is that AV is worthless. Now you need EDR to stop baddies. For EDR, you want the EDR provider to know how attackers work and be constantly adapting their EDR products to detect new attacks and malicious behaviors. Qualys knows vulnerabilities, but do they actually know the mind of an attacker? I don't know if you want to speak specifically to Qualys, but if you want to talk about kind of that inference about how EDR as a technology, utilizes threat intelligence to kind of do that behavior analysis and adapting to TDPs. I don't know if you want to kind of key in on that from your experience in your space.
So when I was talking, I feel like this was a little softball, whoever sent it, because when I
Is
was
that Jeff? Is that Jeff hanging out in Chad?
such a thank you. No, so when I was saying earlier, it's well beyond AV and EDR, right? So I think it has to do with other technologies as well. So I think it's prudent to, and I won't go into that, but I think it's prudent to layer other technologies. But what I think is really prudent is working with a company that understands the adversary, right? And if you don't understand the adversary and how the adversary is constantly changing, you can't fine tune the tool to do what it needs to do and constantly change, right? And again, I'm not questioning Qualys, or maybe Qualys has an enormous staff of threat intel folks, but I will say that I think that is critical to the ultimate success of being able to pivot and change solutioning. Not product, you can call it EDR still, but what's kind of the man behind the curtain, and a lot of that is just strictly intelligence.
Is it then, is the value of EDR then the value of the people who can provide that analyzed intelligence and convert that into digital algorithms for a product?
I think it's part that, and then I think it's part instrumentation, right? How do you use it? How can you take it, right? Because it could be the smartest whatever wizards and all the threat intel people in the world, but if I can't implement it because it was too hard to implement, it doesn't really matter, right? So I think it's probably 60-40. I don't know. That's swag there.
That's a guess. That's a guesswork on
that. There's a swag. Noting again that I am not a threat intelligence analyst, by the way. One more time.
No. Thank you very much. That's that brings us to the top of the hour, which covers the kind of the news section of. Tori, thank you so very much for your contributions there. We're gonna take a 2-minute break. We're gonna put on a be right back, and that's really just to kind of get up, stand up, stretch our legs a little bit, get a refresh on the water and whatnot. But then we're gonna come back, and Tori's gonna kind of talk to us about her career, about where she's been. We've asked Tori to come on board because she does have a unique perspective on being a woman in cybersecurity, and we want to talk to her about her experiences in that space. And so take a 2-minute break. We're going to put a be right back sign up, and so 8:05 we'll be right back, and we'll sit down and talk to Tori about her career. All right, welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody refreshed on their tea, water, adult beverage, wine, whatever floats your boat. Not advocating for underage drinking. Hopefully, nobody's doing some of that. Welcome back. As per our usual schedule, right, the first half was spent on cybersecurity news. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that section. As always, right, keep the chat open. If you didn't get to answer your question in the first half, don't sweat it. Go ahead and continue to drop those questions in. We'll continue to carry them, throughout the rest of the chat and everything else. Remember, if you're enjoying the stream, make sure you hit that follow, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Just a reminder for those who are tuning in about some of the activities that we've got going on. Later this week, don't forget this is the week of DEF CON, Black Hat. DEF CON is completely free this week. Make sure that if you're interested in participating in DEF CON, you go check out their page and start signing up for events. We will be doing some special streams. They're already on the schedule for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We'll also be participating in some Capture the Flags. We do still have an open slot on our OSINT CTF team for Saturday. Throw us a follow on Twitter. Post in chat what your ad is for following us up on Twitter, and we'll put you in for the drawing to be put on our team for the OSINT. We'll also be giving away pretty much any prizes that we win for participating in those. So we also got I got a stack of stuff. I've got a couple Wi-Fi pineapples down there. I've got some software-defined radios down there. I've got a hack RF. I got a couple nice little goodies that we're going to give away Thursday, Friday, and Saturday throughout the stream as well. So make sure that you're tuning in for the stream for your chance to get away with some good hacker goodies. With that being said, we're going to kind of roll into our next section, which is really a career focus section, and we really try to really try to bring people on to give a lot of different perspectives in terms of their career. So you're not just always listening to me ramble on. I know I've got a beautiful voice, and I'm always so interesting and things like that. Don't laugh yet, Tori. But I know it's also beneficial to hear from other folks throughout the industry and with different experiences and different ways that they've kind of come up. And so, with that being said, I'd like to reintroduce my special guest for the night, Miss Tori Ward. I've known Tori Ward for probably 4 or 5 years now, somewhere around in there. I met her a few years back when she was working on, a company that I was working at when she was with a previous employer. Very tenacious, very, very smart in her space. She's a real go-getter. And so thank you again on behalf of myself and behalf of my viewers. Thank you again, Tori, for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me.
So, as we always do these, obviously, just similar with the chat that we did before, any questions as Tori's going along, go ahead and drop those into chat. I'll continue to go across questions, and I'll take a break and I'll check chat, and obviously my producer will ping me whenever there's any questions in there. And so as Tori's talking, please don't hesitate to drop those questions in there. Now, Tori, you spent a long time at McAfee before you came to your current role.
I did a long time.
Now McAfee hasn't always had the greatest reputation in the cybersecurity space. So how did you end up landing at McAfee?
So I had sold long distance. I worked for a long distance company, which is potentially the worst job you can have out of college. And I really wanted to get into software, but I didn't really understand that when I started. I interviewed with Network Associates, and on my first interview, I didn't actually understand that it was a security company. And he was like, on the whiteboard, he was like, there's this thing called antivirus. And I was like, what? And the rest is kind of history. And so at that time, Network Associates had fallen into a little bit of a scandal situation, public. And let's just say that they probably, if there was a mirror and you could fog it, that's probably how I got in there. So, and I was pretty young. Yeah, that's how I got into the space. And I was super lucky just to see that company do really awesome things. And it taught me, I just learned so much there and worked with awesome people. It was It was really good.
So then did
Good
you
time.
work? You worked at Network Associates, and then they got bought by McAfee, or did you jump straight into McAfee and get a job like right with McAfee proper?
So Network Associates was McAfee and Network General. So
Gotcha.
Network
Mhm.
Associates had
Wow, that's
bought
old.
the company from John McAfee.
Yeah.
And so when I started there, John McAfee was no longer involved, although I swear to God, like it was like I was defending that like even 2 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, it's been like
Did you ever get to
20
meet? Did you
years.
meet John McAfee in the early
No,
days?
because he
No.
wasn't part of the company. So he left the company. I think he sold the company in 96.
Mm.
um, before he went on to all of his other adventures. But um, so those two companies, that's what made up Network Associates. And then though they divested the two companies, I can't remember when, and then went back to the McAfee name. And
Gotcha.
so half the group went with Network General, and the other half went with McAfee.
So when you first landed at McAfee, did you have a cyber role, or was that your first cyber role, or did you have another role inside of McAfee before you kind of got into cyber? Did you landed right into a cyber role?
Yeah, but it wasn't really called cyber back then.
It
I mean, you're
wasn't.
not that young either, so you remember that, okay? Like you remember that it wasn't really called cyber. I mean, I think it was called antivirus. That's what it was called. But yes, so I would say yes, I went straight into a cyber role.
No, and you're right. And yes, for some of our younger viewers who are potentially watching, there wasn't a cyber, back there in that day. What was being in McAfee, being in those days before there was a cyber designator. What was business like selling antivirus before there was cyber?
Yeah, I mean, so literally when I first started, there were still floppy disks. Oh no. So I mean, it was so what was cool about it, genuinely, and I would say this is why I've kind of stayed in the industry is so started didn't understand at all what it was or what it did, right? Picked that up pretty easily because it wasn't that complex. The company actually did lots of other things like um, uh, a help desk. I mean, we had lots of other products. So antivirus was just one of them. And by the time we spun off, then we were pretty much just antivirus. And that's when other technologies were kind of entering the market, like a firewall, a desktop firewall, intrusion prevention, that sort of thing. But what was cool is I sort of watched the industry evolve to, I remember sitting, I was at a customer site when they were hit with the I love you virus.
Oh gosh.
And I was sitting in the conference room and I was like, this is very bad. Like, this is very bad. And just, and then all code red and just, so really watched the industry really evolve and then watched technologies evolve with the industry, right? So McAfee would just like all tech, just like all tech companies or cyber companies will today, the the tech method will change or things will change and then the technology has to change with it. And so it was fun to see. McAfee was always a leader in that, and that was super fun. So yeah, it was. I mean, it was just very, very fast paced.
So for those listening, the I love you virus, I remember the I love you virus too. It was one of the first visual basic, script type viruses that we had back in the day, and you got it in your email, and it was embedded HTML because every Outlook browser out there automatically rendered HTML and didn't do any checks on it whatsoever, and so it was pretty nasty back in the day. So was that your first incident, if you will, was being on a client site when they got hit with I love you virus?
Well, no, probably not.
No,
But I would say the first bad one.
the first bad
Let's
one.
and here's the thing too. Like, who wouldn't open up an email that said "I love you"? Right? It's like, oh well, who loves me? So finally, right? And so that's, I mean, truly, like that's like spread like wildfire. So yeah.
So what was the culture like at McAfee at the time? And I guess let me be a little bit more pointed than that, right? Is at and it doesn't have to be McAfee. Let's talk about your entire career in cyber, right? Is did you ever feel like you were in a male dominated field, or what was kind of that culture that you were exposed to, inside of cybersecurity at the time?
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to like the obvious gender gap that still exists in diversity gap, candidly, that exists today. Yeah, I mean, that was definitely, ironically, I wouldn't say it's any different now than it was then,
Oh gosh.
sadly.
Oh gosh.
I know,
Just
I
rip that Band-Aid right
know,
off of there, why
I
don't you?
know. Well, what's funny is that at McAfee, I was always like the youngest person, so that was more of my issue. It wasn't really being a woman; it was more like she's so young, and well, then that ended obviously after a while. But yeah, I mean, I would say both on the client side and on the internal side. Yeah, there's just there's just not a lot of diversity.
No, no,
Period.
no, that's an
So
interesting one. When you bring up the client side, did you face discrimination when you went to client sites?
no, I think discrimination relative to my experience is way too harsh probably for
Mm,
any circumstance that I had. I mean, and again, literally, I would say I was more discriminated against for being younger
mm.
than being a woman, right? Because like I feel like it's like, well, can we take her seriously? What does she know? So I would say, and in truth, right? Like you need to get right for we're all young, and that's awesome, right? So but I think, I had to work twice as hard to bone up and understand what I was doing and understand the industry. So I probably had to work harder to be more credible, but that was fine. That's no problem. And I would take a lot of pride in doing that.
What kind of
Where
thing?
maybe,
What kind of things would you do to bone up on the industry, or to get smarter in that, to try to bridge that age gap?
well, so, my big thing and still today is just I will ask questions annoyingly so. And I remember
I can
I
vouch
would
for
leave
that.
little notes. Can you even imagine knowing me? Can you imagine that? But I would leave little notes in the office, like paper notes,
Mm.
say, is there any way that you would have time to spend 10 minutes with me after work going over, such and so? And so I would maybe pick a topic or whatever. And some people would say no, which is
Oh
hilarious.
no.
I know. But most people would say yes.
Yeah.
And and just but then I would I still love talking to clients about experiences and what they think and what they see and that different things like that.
So going back to being in a male dominated career field, um, how did you approach that obvious diversity gap, even from an age perspective or from a gender perspective? How did you approach that, and then how did you actively try to overcome that, or did you, how did you actually try to overcome? Was it just the learning piece of that, or were you ever conscious of that, or how did you just kind of you work your way through that?
Yeah, I don't. So I was never conscious of it for sure. I mean,
Mm,
I would say that I've always kind of operated around the UBU method, right? And so I am, whether this is right or wrong, I am pretty much the same person professionally that I am personally, and I, the same values, same, I kind of have that across the board. And I speak the truth, and so I'll be really candid. I'm a horrible liar, right? But I don't ever, I never saw it as something to overcome,
mm.
ever really. It was like I'm here to get the job done, and let's get the job done.
Were you able to find mentors in this space pretty easily?
Yeah, yeah, but I think part of that too is I think part of the mentor thing is you have to pursue the mentor, right? Like the mentors aren't going to come and find you. You have to go find them.
So
And yeah,
no, go ahead, go ahead.
well, and I was just going to say, in the example of the person who said they wouldn't meet with me after work ended up actually becoming a dear friend. And I think the world of him, but um, it's who cares if somebody says no, or who cares, people are busy and people always have crap going on. Right. So it's like, they might have time for you or whatever. Right. So then approach the next person. But I would also be pretty thoughtful around, like, I would watch how other people behaved, and I would, you know, approach people that I liked their style or what they stood for and that sort of thing. But I definitely think it's you targeting them. They're not going to come looking for you. And I think, one of the things in all of the companies that I've worked for, I think everyone wants this mentor program. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's like, oh yeah, we're going to create this great mentor program. And generally, I think that they're not successful, but that's not the company's fault, right? It's like it takes two to tango, and both parties have to be in it, and working towards a common goal. And that goes for the mentee as well. And as I've been in the industry for a while, I am cognizant that I should that I want to try harder, but I could try harder, right? I definitely could be doing more than I'm doing. But I try to do little things like where I work now, we send out every week new folks to the company, and I will almost always try to reach out to the females that have the same role that I
Mm-hmm.
have and say, welcome to the company. And is there anything I can do for you? And, these are some things that helped me or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But we all get busy, right? And so I think it's like the best laid plans, but you have to keep trying. You can't be like, oh, well, I couldn't do it. Well, that didn't work. I was too busy. No, that doesn't work
Oh
either,
well.
right? So, yeah.
So then what do you, when you, as you come throughout your career, what were some of the things that you looked for early on in your mentors versus what are some of the things that you look for now in a mentor? Have they changed? Do you still feel like you need a mentor now, or do you feel like you've kind of grown out of that or grown past that? But how is that search for a mentor? How has that changed throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think I probably look for the same thing. I mean, I don't think I've changed that much in that regard. I mean,
Mm.
my style hasn't really changed really at all. I would say that I probably seek out more customers as mentors, and I didn't do that before because
Mm.
I would be intimidated or like, oh, they're too busy. And then conversely, I've tried to help customers um, as well. So, you know, if somebody's looking for a job, or if I can tell somebody's unhappy or whatever, try to make connections among people. I don't know if that's exactly mentoring, but I think, I love building a community, and, everyone should be happy and right. So it's like, how can we connect different people and make different connections? And again, whether that's like for a new career, or whether that's just, I think you two would get along, you guys should know each other sort of thing. Um, I love doing that too.
So on this topic of community, since you brought it up, do you feel, you know, is it your perspective of the industry? Are there enough female focused community groups to help bring women along in that mentorship path currently in the cybersecurity space?
Um, there's a lot more than there were, for sure. Um, I think, for me, I feel like, and again, I say this and it's like, so what are you doing to change it? But is I think it's really about getting the interest out there,
Mm,
right? So I think there's a deficiency, and if we're just gonna like, let's just talk about women. Like, if there's a deficiency of women in cyber, but how are we trying to recruit women? What are we doing to try to make that appealing? How are we educating graduates, that sort of thing, to get the interest there? Because I think there is a stigma around, that's a male job, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's not at all. In fact, women are the best problem solvers, in my opinion, and there's a lot of problems to be solved in cyber. So I think that's really a challenge, and I don't know how to fix that one. I started a women in IT group at my previous company, and I've continued it where I am now. And one of the speakers that we had when McAfee was owned by Intel was having their their part of HR that goes out and recruits come and speak to, like a lunch and learn sort of thing. And that was helpful, but it's like, how do we kind of do more of that, and how do we help customers entice, the young population, the young diverse population in general?
so I love that you brought up, getting them, fresh out of, at a young age, trying to bring them into the career field young and at the college level. And I've been part of collegiate intern programs and things like that, throughout my career as well. And I know you literally just said you didn't think you had an answer for it, but I want to challenge you on that a little bit and just say, like, what do you think, if you were to be given that scepter for a day and said, fix this problem in cyber, how do we get more interest in a younger, female, type individual to be interested in cyber? What are even some cultural things or some things that we may have to change intrinsically about our career field to drive that interest?
I mean, and again, this could be a little short-sighted. I feel like there's confusion, right, about the industry, and that's not a female thing. Like, that's men or women, and right. So I feel, but again, how do you kind of solve for that? Because if you're in college or even high schoolers, and I think it's getting better. I mean, I think there's there's more cyber camps that are for girls and boys, and that sort of thing. But how do we promote those in high schools? Like, I can tell you the high school my daughter goes to, they're definitely not promoting that there. So how does that become more of a mass reach sort of thing, even an activity? Going into schools, talking about cyber in schools, kids take computer classes. They don't really learn about cyber, which is criminal, really, right? I mean, it's like my kids think that I'm a physical security guard. So, like, I'm not doing a good job, and I've been in the industry forever. So, yeah, I mean, I think it kind of starts young, and we all, everybody in the space kind of has an obligation, I feel like, to reach out to your local schools, reach out to elementary, high school, go in, do a pitch, right? And I say this, and I've only done that one time, right? So, like, practice what you preach, like, get in there and start to create an interest. Start to create an interest and an education around it as well.
So going back to some of the work that you've done, like you mentioned having a women's group at McAfee and where you're at right now and things like that, outside of somebody, like yourself taking the initiative and creating groups like that, how do you feel, that emphasis on diversity and inclusion, especially regarding women, in the cybersecurity space? How do you feel about, like, the sudden blow up of that need for diversity and inclusion? Do you feel, it's about time? Do you feel it's, too much is it too soon, too late, or too much, too late, or whatever the anecdotal remark for that is? Or, what is it you feel about seeing all of these companies now that are now all of a sudden getting this epiphany about trying to do more for diversity and inclusion, especially regarding women?
No, I definitely think that it's bring it on. And again, for my personal experience, I haven't felt discrimination or anything like that, but I certainly feel that we could just, I think the more diverse the population at the table, the better we're all going to be. Everybody has different ideas. Everybody can bring something else to the table. I really am just, let's keep it going. I mean, that's my biggest thing. And how do we just continue to keep the train on the tracks for awareness around it? And I think we're at a place now that, it's just my opinion, I think we're going to be able to do that, probably more than we've ever done it in the past, which is awesome.
So this level of optimism is encouraging, and so I didn't expect this level of optimism when we got down to here. So I think this is going to be an easy softball for you as well. Is, do you think, or are companies doing enough to balance out that gender equation, in your opinion, just generally speaking?
Doing enough. I mean, could everybody sit down and be like, what else could we do? Probably, right? But I also am a big fan of the right person for the job is the right person for the job, right? And so I think that's part of we have to try to create a groundswell around, we need to get more people in the door for the opportunity. But, we could all be doing more. I mean, for sure, we could be doing more, but I definitely, the awareness is an awesome first step for sure.
Is there enough awareness? Do you think we've got the right level of awareness now?
No, I think there could be a little bit. There could be a little bit more, just a little bit more. But no, I mean, all joking aside, I mean, I definitely, I think the word awareness is sort of the key there. At least I think there's always, I feel like for a while, I feel like there's been, okay, we all get it, but there was maybe a little less due. I feel like there's probably going to be more due. And I feel like there's a good understanding and need of why it's good to have sort of a mix at the table.
What, and this is a tough one, right? Is when you talk about like people could always do a little bit more, is that a personal feeling because you think that do you think that companies are tone deaf now to diversity and inclusion because it's been shoved down their throat, and so they've kind of taken the minimal amount of work that they needed to do to meet that diversity and inclusion, kind of threshold? Or do you think companies generally want to do more from a diversity and inclusion perspective?
So this could be too optimistic, but I genuinely think that they want to do more. I
Yeah.
really do. I mean, and I guess I can only kind of speak for where I've been, but definitely, I think it's that it's needed, right? We got to grow, and I think this is an awesome avenue to grow.
Mm-hmm. So I want to throw some stats at you, just in terms of this, and I want to kind of get your take on them. Just I'll read the stat to you, and then just kind of the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about it, just like kind of pop off on that and just kind of carry that thread however you want to, right? 20% of the cybersecurity jobs globally have female representation. That's as of 2019.
I think that sounds right.
You think that sounds right?
Accurate. Yeah. Accurate. Yeah.
Is an idea of a good world where that number is closer to 50% in your mind?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you think that we have a shortage of female representation? If we look at from the C-suite, let's take CISO, right? Let's start at the CISO and let's go all the way down. Where do we need more female representation between the analyst down at the bottom and the CISO roll up at the top?
So there's for sure a deficiency in the executive tower. I mean, without question, across the board. And I would say in the very technical, a shortage in the very technical aspects.
All right. So the next one for you. 51% of women in cybersecurity hold a master's degree or higher versus 45% for men.
I believe that.
Why?
I'm not going to call BS.
Why on that one? Why?
Well, I mean, I think
your guess, best guess.
There's more women than there are men. We try harder. No,
I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
Can one of the moderators please strike Tori from future interviews?
Let's strike that last statement.
We'll edit that one out.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but let's be honest, that's still pretty close. 51-45. It's pretty close. It's not like 80 and 10 or 80 and 20, right? It's like it's pretty close.
So do you think a master's? I guess when I look at a stat like that, right? Do women feel they need to have a master's degree to compete with men in the same criteria, or was that just drive and motivation? Or
well, I think it's probably drive and motivation. And this is not my statistic. This is
sure,
and I can't remember. I can't give anybody credit for it, but I mean, it's been there are studies that show a male candidate will go for a job if he's not qualified and go, I'm just going to try to go get it, which is what we all should do, right? Like, I mean, I have this qualification, this and this. There's 7 total, and I have 3. I'm going to go for it. I'll at least try. And women don't generally do that. They're like, well, I have to have all 7 and I've only got 6. I won't do it. I mean, that's kind of proven. And again, that's not that's something that I've heard in the past, like kind of repeatedly at different sources, but it shouldn't be like that, right? We should all be going for jobs, and we should all be trying if that's what we wish to do as well.
So let's pull on that thread a little bit, right? And let's dive a little deeper in that. Psychologically, what is it? if you had to guess, right, that makes it feel like, if you're not 10 of 10 qualified, you shouldn't apply for that role?
I think it's just it's probably ingrained. I mean, I would like to think that I wouldn't necessarily be like that, but I also have worked around a lot of men and kind of seen like, well, he shouldn't have gotten promoted. That's stupid, right? So I think that comes with age as well. Like you kind of figure out like this isn't, and you got to stand up for what you believe in. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I don't psychologically. I don't know why that's the case, but it is something that I've heard kind of repeatedly throughout my career.
Mm-hmm. Is there a perception in your mind, from your experience, from what you've seen, that kind of getting back to your feelings that you had when you first started at McAfee, where you were younger, you had to learn so much, that you didn't put yourself out there, you weren't as assertive, and you didn't take the risk that you thought you needed to as in the career that you probably could have to push yourself a little further, a little faster?
Yeah, I mean, if I were going to do it again, I probably would have done some different things and taken some different risks. But I also, I mean, my path is my path.
Sure.
And for me, it was like, and I think this is the case for a lot of women, is I wanted to kind of keep a steady course because I had kids and I wanted to be with the kids. And, right. So that was a decision that I made. Candidly, I could have probably done it all. I mean, I was still working a lot. So what would be the difference between that higher level job versus the job that I was doing? But I don't have any regrets around that either. Right. I mean, I think, there was a lot of fear of failure. And so I, just tried to kind of stay like, I know I can stay in this lane and be okay. And you need not be like that. If you fail, who cares? Just get up and try it again. It doesn't really matter.
And you say that from the perspective of whether you're a woman or a man, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. You put yourself out there and fail hard and fail fast.
Right. Hustle.
Hustle.
Your big board behind you. Hustle. I love it.
So let me throw another one at you then. This one's a little bit more direct. 51% of women claim they face discrimination on the job.
Yeah, I mean, candidly, it's probably higher. I mean, I only say that because I think some of the awareness that's come out in recent years, of Hollywood, public things and different cases, I think a lot of women are probably like, oh, wow, I was discriminated against, or I was harassed, or whatever. Like I was just, moving right along. But yeah, I mean, I think I think there is, I think there's, I'm not saying that people mean to discriminate. I do think it happens though. Right. And I think, good news is, I think that we have the awesome younger population that's not going to stand for it anymore. Right. And I think, Dave Chappelle said it best. I'm happy to ride in the backseat of this generation. And I really am. I think that, I may have stood for it and they won't. And so that's good. And then that drives like this, maybe an environment where that won't be the case anymore. But I think there is biases that you don't even know that you have, as we all know. Mm-hmm. And that ends up happening. And, I'm pretty feisty. So I fought for a lot of like, I wasn't going to be like, it was like, you're not going to do that. Right. So, but some people can't do that. Right. And I think it's tough to do that. And so it's, that's what makes it challenging for a lot. So,
but when you talk about that feistiness, like if there's an individual that's listening right now, right, that's trying to make his or her way through that career, how do you teach somebody that feistiness, and how do you teach somebody, especially a female that's coming up through cybersecurity, what is your piece of advice to them to transfer your feistiness? And I've seen that about you, and that tenacity is amazing coming out of you. How do you transfer that away from you and into somebody else? What can they do to that to empower that or embolden that?
Well, I mean, I think you have to, and this sounds a little cheesy, but I think you have to have your values pretty defined, right? And you can define your values when you're 20, right? Or 15, or right. I mean, you can define them early. You know what's important to you. And I think just speaking the truth, I feel like there's so many times when people just need to be called out on, and that doesn't make sense. I saw this she's an author and speaker, Lovia J, a couple years ago, and um she was it was like a live performance, and she was talking about, she was sitting in a meeting and she called the guy Bob, whatever his name was, and she was like, and everyone was like, oh yeah, Bob, that's a great idea, Bob. Oh, Bob, you're so smart, you're so smart. And she was like, Bob's an idiot, and no one's calling Bob out on just being an idiot. She goes, no, you don't need to say, Bob, you're an idiot, but if you don't put your hand up and go, I have a thought on that, or however you do it, and there's a time and a place for that, right? But I mean, I would say that has been just what I've tried to do: speak your truth, know your truth, and fight for fight for the next day.
Do you feel like that point about knowing your value and your worth, do you feel like that helps give you confidence when you're sitting in that meeting room and you've got to raise your hand and you've got to speak out against Bob because he's an idiot? Do you feel like it's part of knowing your worth gives you the confidence that you need to be able to do that, or how do you find that confidence? How do you dig deep to find that confidence to speak out against Bob?
Well, and so what I'm saying about, I'm talking like core values.
Mm-hmm.
So like if somebody is talking nonsense, like it's a core value. Like you have to speak the truth. You have to own what you're saying. You have to follow through on what you're saying. And if if we're all sitting there going, Bob's going to say that and nothing's going to happen, how are we ever going to move it forward, right? And so I think that's, and those things change over time too, or they can change, right? Like something that was important 10 years ago may not be so important now, or whatever. But I think trying to challenge yourself to sit down and define that, like, because it kind of goes back to like, who am I, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then that helps. That's sort of that's your rudder. That's the guiding light, to keep you, to feel good, right? And I know that I did the best job that I could, and I, fought as hard as I could for it, or whatever.
Okay. One more stat for you, and again, we don't have to get into specifics, but thoughts on this as well, right? Is women still face an uphill salary battle in cybersecurity, and so on average, women make 12% less than men in salaries under $100,000.
Which is crazy given your master's statistic, right? Like
right.
It's just crazy. Like it shouldn't be like that. Yeah, I can't. Yeah.
Does this get back to
like that?
Does this get back to your, going for something that, and I've heard a similar statistic to the one that you report about, women wanting to be 10 of 10 before they go to apply a job, and so, I've also heard statistics that generally speaking they push harder. They don't push as hard at the negotiating table for salary out of fear that type of pushback, will reflect negatively upon them. Do you think that that's a true statement? Do you feel like that's a fair categorization of that?
Yeah, no, I definitely do. And then I also, if you put it in terms of you are going in knowing that you're the minority, and if you really want the job, I don't really care if it's, I'll take a little bit less, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think that you're not going to get the job, then you're not going to negotiate hard. Now, I would say that is completely wrong. And if they don't deserve you if you can't get the job, right? Because there's one thing about negotiations, and there's another of just what's fair and equitable, right? So, I will say though, again, cautiously optimistic that I'm hoping that will improve. That's just silly. Like that just doesn't need to be the case.
12%. 12%.
It's just crazy.
Yeah. So real quick, we do this with all of our guests, and so I'm gonna put you on the spot. 3 things for the people who are listening right now, the people who are going to listen to this, in the post-record video on YouTube that's going to last forever. Your 3 words of wisdom for anybody listening right now, male or female, what are the 3 things that they can walk with today to be successful, to have a successful career in cyber?
Speak your truth.
Okay, so that's 1.
Those are 3 words. Speak your truth.
You can't use all 3 words for no. That's only 1.
Should I pull up the top 10 list that I sent you last night? That
yes,
probably would
yes.
be appropriate.
Pick 3 of those off the top 10.
So no, seriously. So obviously I've said it a lot, but I do love the, honesty and speaking your truth, and, being, holding yourself at a high standard to do the best that you can do. And I would say it's just hard work, right? Like I think that goes across every spectrum, man, woman, it doesn't matter. Just working really hard. And if you want something, go get it. And I think that's the cool part about cyber. It's just so ever changing that you could find yourself in a certain role, and you could become an expert in that role. And then you could show, we could do this, we could do that. It's not stodgy. It's really ever changing to give you a lot of opportunity.
Is that what you like the most about cyber?
I love it because it's just so different all the time. And I didn't really honestly come to appreciate that until probably the last 10 years, in truth. Like, looking back, it was kind of a job. And then I was like, well, this is a cool job. This is a lot of fun. So, yeah.
Cool. So was that 3? Yeah, I think that was 3. I think you did give 3 with that one. All right, cool. Let's hit the chat real quick, and let's see if we've got anything in chat for you to answer. So looks like you got a comment. She must be C-level to have this kind of optimism.
I can't help myself.
Are you C-level yet, Tori?
I'm so not C-level.
So
I wish I was, though. That's what I go back to. Like, I could have done that.
What keeps you optimistic? Like let's pick on that. What keeps you optimistic, especially in this space?
Well, I think for me, really, I think when you started talking about my previous career, and I was there for 20 years, I think believing in what you're doing and where you are is really important. And I genuinely did believe that. I believed that I could help people and I could solve problems, and we were all marching towards, the same goal. We're all in the same boat. So I think that is like a core value of mine. That's really important. And then that helps me stay optimistic. And if you're working somewhere where it's maybe you feel like, you're in the boat and everyone else is on the harbor waving at you, it's probably not the right place. And so you probably won't be very optimistic because it feels sad and lonely. So, I think my optimism is just, as it relates to employment, it's being somewhere that I really genuinely believe in and I believe can be helpful.
Cool. Well, I'm gonna monologue for a second, just to give everybody a chance to put in the last minute questions in the chat for Tori. But Tori, thank you so very much for your time. Thank you very, very much for sitting down with me for 2 hours talking about cybersecurity, talking about the things that we've got going on, sharing your amazing career history with us, and a lot of the things that you've been through and gone through, and from myself, from my viewers, from my entire staff here that helps me with the stream. Thank you so very much for your time. I really do appreciate it. And with that, you can hang out in Zoom, and I'll chat with you afterwards, or I can call you or text you, and we'll do a debrief afterwards. But we'll continue to
hang out. Thank you.
We'll continue to monitor chat just in case anybody drops any last minute questions in there for you. With that, I'll go ahead and wrap up a little bit for tonight. Don't forget, if you enjoyed the stream, smash that follow over there on Twitch. Hit that subscribe button. Just a quick reminder for everybody, right? We've got a busy week this week with DEF CON. I know I've said it a couple times. I just want to make sure that everybody hears it, just in case we miss anybody. We're going to stream a lot of the events that are coming in with DEF CON, we're going to keep within the rules in terms of making sure we don't cheat and things like that. We'll be doing post-talk commentary for some of the stuff that's going to go on in DEF CON this week. We'll be doing giveaways. So very, very busy week for us this week. Make sure that you reach out to us. Make sure you follow us for updates and things like that. We did get one, Tori, one for you. I knew if I monologued enough, we'd get one. Do you get to travel quite a bit for work, and do you view that as as a perk of the job?
I definitely don't view it as a perk. So back when we could travel, I did travel. And even Neil knows this. So I'm not a big dinner person. I'm kind of like, I work and then I take care of all the kids. And so, I kind of have a boundary there. So I definitely don't think it's a perk. But at McAfee, my bosses used to always be like, don't feign like you're sick. You're pretending you're sick again and you're not. I'd be like, no, I'm not really that sick. So no, I don't really like the travel. I mean, I like to travel. I don't like to travel for work.
Now let's quantify that just a little bit. We've got a few minutes of time, right? So you when you were at McAfee, you were regional, right? You had the Midwest.
Yeah.
Yes-ish. Yeah, somewhere in there. So you didn't have to travel nearly as much as maybe some other folks that are in your particular type of role.
Yeah, I would have to go to California like maybe once a quarter or something like that. But yeah, not a lot.
Not a lot. Okay. All right, so I'm going to monologue again for oh my God, everybody in InfoSec loves to travel around and stay up late having huge dinners on the company dime. It is exhausting, honestly. do you like that?
It is, right?
It is. I mean, look, DEF CON is we're off on a tangent now, right? But I'll carry this tangent, right? This is DEF CON week, right? Everybody thinks it's fun to be in Vegas, but if you start DEF CON on Friday, last Friday would have been the start of DEF CON, you would be in Vegas from last Friday all the way till Sunday night, doing nothing but eating at every casino, going to vendor dinners and parties, especially at Black Hat. So much debauchery, it's not even funny. And you may think it's fun, but it is ridiculously exhausting to be part of that. It's not nearly as much fun as everybody makes it out to be.
Completely. I would have to, like, I had the 2-night limit every year. Our customer conference is in Vegas, and I'd be like, I can only go 2 nights. I can't.
I gotta get home.
More than that. I just can't. Period.
Did you do a DEF CON or a Black Hat? You didn't do a DEF CON or a Black Hat.
They didn't trust me there.
I wouldn't trust you there either. I barely trust you around Chicago. Okay, all right. So again, thanks everybody for joining the stream. We're gonna go ahead and do it. Go ahead and call it close for tonight. Don't forget to hit that follow and that sub. We'll see everybody on Wednesday. Keep it safe. Keep it above board. We'll talk to everybody later.